doors back there. So our conference begins today and goes through Tuesday evening. Chris and Rosemary Bloomer are in another church in Florida. They'll be with us tomorrow, and he'll be presenting and sharing a message tomorrow evening. And then on Tuesday, we'll have split sessions. The ladies will meet in one place, the men in the other. And it's a more intimate setting where you get to kind of know what missions is all about very practically. And I think that's helpful for us as church folks to know how to pray and to understand what it's like to be a missionary on a foreign field. And so I think these sessions are very helpful for us. And especially when we have our own missionaries in, we like to do the split sessions because then we can hear things that can help us to know better how to pray, if there are needs to give toward, and so forth. And so we like to do that. So that'll be Tuesday evening. Each evening, beginning at 5, we'll serve a meal. It'll be served anywhere between 5 and 6. So if you get off work and you can show up at 5 till 6, the meal will be available to you. And so at about 6:15 or so, we'll make our way over for the service. If you can help with cleanup after the meal, we would appreciate any help. The meals in the evening on Monday and Tuesday are by donation, so if you can give a few dollars, that would be a help toward covering that cost. So tomorrow night, I'm actually going to be smoking up some pulled pork and a little bit of beef. I know some folks don't eat pork, so there'll be some beef as well. And then on Tuesday, there will be subs and salad. So that'll be our meals for Monday and Tuesday evening. We hope you can stay with us or be with us on those evenings. We try to make it as easy as possible. The services start at 6:30. We try to be done as close to 7:30 as possible. We know it's school and work week, so we want to be sensitive to that, but we also want to give a proper and good emphasis toward missions. It's the Lord's heartbeat, and it should be ours as well. And so we give a portion of our year toward a conference like this. Last year we actually got hurricaned out. We were supposed to have one, and the Hurricane Ian came, and so we had to shift, and we ended up having the Reiners in March, and so it was different that way. The year before, we had a couple of new missionaries in, the Endines and the Petersons, and so since COVID, things have been a little bit crazy, but we're trying to get back into the normal routine of missions conferences. But we're glad to have Tim and Kim with us. Kim's father, she was helping to care for him, passed away, was it in the month of May. And so she's able to travel with Tim. Originally, when we had scheduled them, it was probably just going to be Tim, but we're glad to have Kim with us here. Interesting story. She was just telling me, was it your first time here? On deputation. The Meltons were here, and they were with Pastor Golson out in the parking lot, and their daughter was inside and was locked in, and they got into the van, and they were wondering, where's Rachel? Where is she? And they looked over at the doors, and her face was plastered to the doors, screaming, rescue me. So that's a fond memory, right? Can't wait to go back to community. We don't have locks like that now. She could just open the door and walk right out. But anyway, we're glad to have them. Japan is a needy mission field. Now, Brother Melton's been there since he was 5 years old. And I remember when you were here, was it probably 4 years ago when you were here? Hearing Brother Melton speak Japanese, here you have, please forgive me, this white guy, all right? And he speaks perfectly. It just doesn't, it shouldn't work that way, but it very well does. He's never gone to language school because he was 5. And he just learned while he was playing with kids, probably, right? And I asked, what's your first language? And Kim said, Japanese. So it's probably knows them both very well. But we're glad to have them with us. Brother Tim, if you'll come and share with us this morning.
Thank you, Pastor. Appreciate it. As he said, we are Tim and Kim Melton. My wife, you want to stand up so she can see the better half. But we are your missionaries to Japan. Nagoya is the city. Americans pronounce it Nagoya, so you could pronounce it however you want. But we've been there for 1999. We went over in 1999 as short-term missionaries, and then went over full-time in 2005. And you all have been supporting us from about that time, so we really appreciate it. We have a ministry update page, meltonministryupdates.com. So if you'd like to keep up with our ministry, you can sign up there. And my wife updates that regularly. In fact, she updated it yesterday. So there's a new prayer on there. So we appreciate your prayers. Japan seems to have much in common with Paul's description of the Athenians in Acts chapter 7. So we're going to look at a couple of things. We'll look at something in the morning service. But first I'd like to talk about who were the people Paul proclaimed the message to. First of all, he called them a land of idolatry. It says in Acts chapter 17, verse 16, says, now while Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. Well, Japan is a country wholly given to idolatry. How many gods would you guess that there were in Japan? Well, Japan calls themselves the land of 8 million gods, but that's not because there's 8 million gods. There's many, many, many more times that many gods in Japan. But in Japanese, 8 million stands for a lot. You know, like we would say, there was a billion of them. We don't mean we counted and there was a billion of them. That's an exaggerated number. And so that's what 8 million in Japanese is. And so they call themselves the land of 8 million gods. You know, that means in English we would say the land of billions and billions of gods, you know. So there are many, many gods in Japan. It is estimated that there are about 80,000 Buddhist temples and about the same amount of Shinto shrines in Japan. So Japanese are both practicing Buddhists and Shintoists. Buddhism, of course, they worship the statues of Buddha. They're all over Japan. Everywhere you go, there's all sorts of statues of Buddha in different, made out of metal or stone or whatever. And they will pray to them. Sometimes the priest will offer incense to them, and the priest will do their idolatrous rituals in front of the statues of Buddha. Besides that, there's these, what they call jizo, which is a roadside idol. And these are all over in Japan also. Alongside the road, you can see them everywhere you go. And these roadside idols are there for people, travelers. Originally, roads in Japan would travel by foot. And so along the path, the footpaths, there would be these jizo, and people would stop and they would bow and worship and ask for safety in travel. And that's what these gods are, specifically for safety in travel and safety for children. That's what they say. Okay. And so they're everywhere in Japan. Thousands and thousands and millions of these things everywhere in Japan. And so they worship that. But not only that, they worship in their homes. They have what they call butsudan, which is a god shelf, an altar, and it's usually ornate, made of gold or whatever, and they open it up, and there will be several things there. There will be a bowl made of brass or something, and there's a little wooden mallet type thing that will boom, and then that'll wake up the spirits or call grandma or whatever. And so they pray to the gods and to the ancestors in front of this butsudan, and sometimes they'll light some incense or light a candle. The modern ones have little switches they flip, and they're electric candles, you know, so they don't have to light them with a match. But so they worship before those. They'll light some incense and stick it in there. Dear grandma or dear great grandma or whatever. And so they are a land of idolatry. Shinto is the national religion of Japan. Buddhism came over from India, but Japan has adopted it. And most Japanese, if you ask them what's your religion, they will say, I'm unreligious. I don't have a religious affiliation. But they go to the temple all the time. In the certain holidays when they're supposed to go, they go. They do the little rituals and ceremonies and things. And so they're practicing Buddhist and they're practicing Shintoism. Shintoism is the national religion of Japan. It is originated in Japan, involved emperorship. Back many, many years ago, they believed that the emperor was God. And so they would worship him as God. I don't think anybody would say he's God now, but technically, from a standpoint of the religion, he is. But so Shinto shrine, Buddhists have temples. Shintos have shrines, not temples. They have big shrines. You can tell a Shinto shrine, distinguish a Shinto shrine from a Buddhist temple. Most Shinto shrines have these ropes. Yeah, rope with it's lightning-shaped paper, and that's a symbol of Shintoism. And so everywhere you go, you can tell whether it's a Buddhist temple or a Shinto shrine. The Shinto religion, they worship demons. They worship them out of fear. And their gods are all fierce-looking gods. Okay? They fear their gods, and they say, please don't do anything bad to me, you know. That's their idea of worship. They have big Shinto shrines. Most Shinto shrines will have a tori, a gateway. If you see a gateway in front of a shrine, that's a temple. That's a Shinto shrine, more than likely. And then they have smaller shrines. They have the roadside shrines. Then most businesses in Japan will have a Shinto shrine somewhere on the premises. It's always built up near the ceiling. And once a year, a Shinto priest will come and do a cleansing ceremony. Cleanse the company of demons and things like that, ward off the demons, and then ask for blessing from the gods or whatever. And all the employees are expected to go. Well, if you're a Christian, that's a very difficult thing. You know, you don't want to be a bad employee. If you don't go, people say, "What? You don't want the success of the company?" And so it's very difficult. And the worst thing that can happen to you in Japan is that your peers reject you, whether you're a student or whatever. If you're rejected by your peers, that's worse than death. Some people get rejected by their peers and go commit suicide. And so they don't want there to be ostracized. They don't want to be. So some Christians will go and they'll like that, and they say, "I'm praying to God." Well, that might be true, but nobody else knows that. So. But it is difficult. It's a difficulty they face. And then in their homes, they have these Shinto shrines. So you have a Butsudan, which is a Buddhist altar, and then you have a Shinto shrine somewhere above this, near the ceiling also. And they put some salt. Salt is supposed to ward off demons, and so they put salt on there and things like that. So, but Paul, in Acts chapter 17, he was burdened for those deceived about the truth of God. And so his response was to convince them of the truth. In Acts chapter 17, verse 16, it says, "Therefore disputed he." So I want to look at what kind of people Paul witnessed to. He witnessed to, first of all, the nationals. It says, "Therefore disputed he in the synagogue with the Jews." Okay, so we have a ministry to the nationals, to the Japanese people. Our Japanese church is, Sunday morning is Japanese, And so all the services in Japanese, the songs are in Japanese. We fellowship in Japanese. All the specials are in Japanese. And so it is our Japanese service. And so we minister to the Japanese people. We also, once a month, we have a ladies' Bible fellowship. On the first Saturday of every month is a ladies' Bible fellowship. And they'll gather and study the Bible. Then after they study the Bible and fellowship a little bit, they'll have a time of refreshment, some food and things like that. They love to get together and fellowship and study the Bible and things like that. We men also have a fellowship. The third Saturday of every month is our men's fellowship, but I have to feed them breakfast first to lure them there. Breakfast, But and I always fix a big spread. I mean, I really fix too much, but they like to take it home, so. I'll fix, sausage and eggs and toast and waffles and pancakes. I mean, you got the whole thing. And coffee and juice and milk and cereal. I mean, I got the whole thing out there. That's trying to get them to come, and it works. We have several men. Most Japanese churches they have ladies' fellowships. All Japanese churches have ladies' fellowships, but none of them have men's fellowships. We never had a men's fellowship for decades because men won't gather for fellowship. And so we finally started one, and when we first started the men's fellowship, the lady came up to us and she goes, "I've been praying for years that you would start a men's fellowship and her husband comes every week, every time, So we have a good fellowship with men, and then we eat first, and then we'll have the challenge from God's Word and some prayer time. So we also have had some new members. Right before I came back, we had about 4 people join the church, which in Japan is a very, very big deal. And so we appreciate God's giving us fruit for the ministry there. And then Paul not only witnessed to the Jews, to the nationals, he witnessed to foreigners. It says, and with devout persons. A lot of translations say God-fearing Gentiles. So we have a ministry to foreigners in Japan who are English-speaking. Most of them are, Malaysian, Indonesian, Filipinos. The biggest population in our church is Filipinos, but they all speak English. English is a common language, so we have an English service. Our Sunday afternoon service is in English, and so they gather, and we have everything's in English, and have a good time of fellowship and studying God's Word. And then the fourth Sunday of every month, we have a combined service. We'll have both churches come together, and we have, I'll say one sentence in English, and I'll say it in Japanese, Japanese, and translate for myself. And we'll have a bilingual Sunday school and then bilingual church service. And then afterwards, we have a potluck meal, and they all look forward to that. Most people from, the foreigners will bring some dish from their country. The Filipinos bring ponce bihon or something like that, if you know what that is. And they bring all sorts of good things. One time they brought last time we were on furlough, I might have showed it in my last presentation, but they brought a pig's face, I was kind of glad I wasn't there. But John, my coworker, said, hey, it was pretty good. But they bring stuff from their own country. We used to have an Indian family. They were with us for about 5 years until they had to move to a different city. But they would bring all sorts of curry, and the Japanese people would love it. The Indian curry, green curry, and all sorts of things. So we have a good time of fellowship around the food. And, we have lots of food. And this is just a typical line. If you'll notice, all the people in line are ladies. We have ladies first. And Japan is male-dominant society, so men will go first, and if there's anything left over, the ladies get it. So we said, no, we're servants, and so we want to have a servant leadership. And so, you can tell the men are kind of like, oh, man, ladies again, hurry up. They're not real happy about it, but... So when we first started, the ladies would they would sit there talking, and men would say, come on, people. And so I made a rule. I said, ladies first for 2 minutes. I usually say ladies first for 2 minutes, and then ladies will jump in line, whatever. Sometimes if the ladies are really talking about it, I say, ladies first for 30 seconds. And they'll run over there, But we have a good time. Our coworkers are the Leones. They've been they're volunteer missionaries in Japan. John teaches English, and Hitomi works, and they have 3 children there that they're raising on the field. They've been with us for about 8 years. They took our place the last furlough. They replaced us in this furlough also. They're doing a good job. And so pray for the Leones, John and Hitomi, and then Jaden, Juliana, and Olivia. And they're doing a wonderful ministry there. People love them, and they're really good. John doesn't speak much Japanese. He does speak Japanese. He's married to a Japanese. His wife is Japanese. They met. Hitomi grew up in my brother's youth group, and went to Bob Jones University. Met John at Bob Jones University, and they got married, and they've been with us, like I said, about 8 years. Hitomi is fighting cancer right now, and she had some chemotherapy, then had surgery, and then she's going through another chemotherapy. She had 3 types of cancer, which was unusual, but I think they caught it in time. But she's been translating all this time, and so pray for John and Hitomi as they continue faithful in the ministry, even despite their difficulties and hardships. And then Paul also witnessed to anyone he met. It says, and in the marketplace daily with them that met with him. Whoever would talk with him, he'd talk to them. And so it's been difficult these past few years, especially with COVID, but we do things to try to meet people. And we'll teach English, we'll do friend parties, we'll do outreach activities and things like that to get to know people, to witness to people, to whoever we can. And then Paul witnessed to those who wanted to know. Some philosophers. Philosopher means lover of wisdom, lover of knowledge. And so we're constantly and clearly proclaiming truth, though not many people in Japan care to listen. We do that through preaching, through teaching, through distributing tracts. We write our own tracts and translate some other literature, evangelistic literature, and distribute that. We do camp ministries, and then we do special meetings and things. So we do whatever we can to reach whoever we can. And then Paul also witnessed to those who indulged their flesh. Many people indulged their flesh. In the New Testament, they're called Epicureans. The Epicureans thought that pleasure was the thing you were supposed to live for, so they did everything that was fun and pleasurable. But he not only did that, he witnessed to those who denied the flesh. There were the other people that said, no, pleasure is bad. If it's fun, it's bad. I heard of a missionary lady one time, and she was really long. She lived a long time. She was in her 90s, and somebody said, what's the secret of your longevity? And she says, well, I don't eat anything that tastes good. I was like, okay, well, that would probably do it. But so these Stoics, they didn't do anything that was fun, anything, they go, that's bad, So Paul witnesses them too. So outwardly, the Japanese seem to be moral, kind, ethical, family-oriented people, but behind the facade, they're very different people. Japanese, what they call themselves, they say we have a honne and a tatemae. A honne is your true face, what you really believe, what you really think, how you really feel. But then the tatemae is your public face. You always must have a pleasant public face. So if you're talking to somebody you hate, you go, hello, how are you? Good to see you. Nice to, And that person's like, I hate you too, but good to see you. So your public face cannot always match your true face. And they know that. Everybody knows that. But it does make for a pleasant, you don't have people go, I hate you. They might hate them, but so they have a honne and tatemae. So the Japanese in general are stoic Epicureans. Okay, they're self-disciplined hedonists. Socially, for example, that comes out in. They have an estimated 37,000 what they call love hotels across the country where you can rent a room by the hour and send discreetly. I think our city has about half of them, but they're that's the outwardly they seem to be moral people, but behind the scene they're discreet about it, but they're very they're sinners. They need to be saved. Religiously, Japan is said to be one of the most religious atheistic countries in the world. En masse, they faithfully participate in religious rituals without any personal understanding or belief. And so they'll go to the temple and bow, and they'll do what their priests say to do or whatever, but they don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it or anything like that. And so they're outwardly religious, but they don't have a personal understanding or belief. And then also Paul witnessed to those who thought he was spouting nonsense. It says, and some said, what will this babbler say? We get those in Japan. Most Japanese don't take your religious statements as to the truth very seriously. And I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. Then he also witnessed to those who thought he was espousing a foreign deity. And others, he seems to be a setter forth of strange gods because he preached Jesus and the resurrection. And so Japanese think we're setting forth strange gods also. But there's not much religious persecution in Japan because they aren't really serious about what they purport to believe. That may have been different in the past, but in these days it's not. Their attitude in general is mostly, I'm Buddhist or Shinto, whatever. It's just, a name thing, a religious thing that I'm Japanese, so I'm Buddhist, And then they say, you're Christian. They presume in name, just like, which is true for most of America now probably, but and so that's fine, whatever. The religion doesn't matter, just let's have a good time. And that's their attitude. And so except for maybe the Sokogakai. Sokogakai is a Buddhist sect, which even most Japanese would consider a cult. No one there fight you for their religious beliefs. It's not like the Middle East. In the Middle East, they'll if you say Jesus is God and I believe in Christ, they'll probably shoot you. Japanese, they're like whatever. So it's very difficult to be serious about witnessing because they don't take it seriously. They're like, okay, whatever. Let's just have a good time. That's their main attitude. Then he also witnessed to those who were curious, and they took him and brought him to Areopagus, saying, may we know this doctrine whereof thou speakest. Some were curious. Some wanted to know. And though it is difficult and not often successful, we try to do things to engender curiosity about God and the truth. I wrote a track one time called Kamite in Japanese, and in that track I said, surely not all are gods who are said to be gods. Is there a way to tell if it's truly God? I said if you add up all the gods, not only the current gods in Japan, the past gods and the past gods of all nations, you got trillions and trillions of. Then I said, is there a way you can tell? I said, yes, if that God was made by man, if that God has a greater, then if there's a greater, Japanese have a hierarchy of gods. And if that God had a beginning, if that God has limited power, if that God is limited to a place, you have to go there to worship that God. If that God's knowledge is limited, then that's not the true God. And of course, all of their idols and their gods qualify under that. And then I went on to say, there's only one true God who is uncreated, sovereign, eternal, omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. And we can know the only true God because he has revealed himself to us in his world and in his word and in his wisdom. as Psalm chapter 19 tells us. But one of the biggest problems in reaching Japanese people is that the culture is more emotional than logical. I'm not saying that they express their emotions freely. They do not. I'm not saying they're not logical, because they are. But how something makes one feel is more important to them than any objective truth. Okay? So if worshiping a statue makes you feel religious, that is more important than any objective fact about the God you purport to worship. So, they're not concerned, is this really a God? They just, it makes me feel religious and worshipful. And so that's what it's okay to do this. They don't think about whether this is really God. There was a interview that I heard on TV. They had developed these two new gods. One, the God of love and the God of prosperity. And they were like, oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? We can go, and we don't have love, we can go to this God and pray, and he'll give us love or give some money or whatever. And if we're lacking financially, we can go to this God and pray, and we can get some money, But this interview is interviewing people, and nobody ever asked, well, where did this God come from? Did we just discover these gods and they've always existed, or did they just come into existence? If so, how did we know? Nobody ever asked that. They were just happy to have these gods that they could worship. Okay, so that's mostly what the Japanese are. So if telling a lie avoids embarrassing yourself or others, you should tell a lie. If saying something you don't mean engenders good feeling, then the dishonest statement is a good thing. And so they practice situation ethics there. For example, if two acquaintances meet on the road or something, and a typical conversation will usually end in "come visit me," with a response "I will" from each. And neither of them mean that. Okay, if you showed up at their house and they said, "What are you doing here?" and he said, "Well, you said come here." "Oh, I didn't mean that." So it's just one of these polite lie things that they tell each other. And then finally, he witnessed to social media. On social media, I think the Greek word is TikTok or something. No, it's not. But it sounds like it. It says, "For all the Athenians and strangers which were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing." It sounds like YouTube or TikTok or something like that. But so. We have a website. We use apps to communicate with our members in Japan. But when we get back, we want to enhance that and to look at some other avenues of reaching people in that way. So, a couple of prayer requests before we take some questions. Please pray for our national pastor. We are church planting missionaries, and so our goal is to go to Japan, plant a church, and turn it over. Well, there's nobody to turn it over to. Even the national churches, some of them are without pastor. We have another church not too far from us. It was a good church, but they're without they have a pastor. The pastor who retired 10 years ago is kind of keeping it going because there's nobody else. And so the Bible school that we're associated with over there has about 5 students, and I think 3 of them are ladies. And so there's no people, no pastoral pool to pull from. And so many churches are lacking that. So pray that the Lord would send somebody that we can work with for some years and turn the ministry over to him. My dad was at his church for his present church. This is the last church he started. He pastored that church for 30-something years, and finally just turned it over to a national pastor the beginning of the year. And so it's very difficult. So pray the Lord would send us a national to work with. And then pray for building funds. The church that does not own the building they have, and so we want to try to help them to own a building, to get a building and own it, and to establish that church permanently. And then pray for a new ministry location. We want to start another church. We had that. We had that as our goal last furlough. I probably said that last time we're going to start a church, and then got back and COVID, hit, and you couldn't do anything. But now they lifted the mask mandate a month before I got back. I got back in April. They lifted the mask mandate in March. And so, even still, people, 80% of people are still wearing masks over there, but it opened up things more. So we plan on starting a new ministry in a new location, and then pray for our outreach ministries. We're always looking for something to do to reach people. We have friend parties and things, but we want to think of something to reach people. And then pray for our literature ministry. We're constantly writing tracts. In fact, I'm starting to write another one last week, so pray for our literature ministry, that God would use that. My dad has passed out personally himself probably over 1 million tracts in the last 10 years. Every week he goes out, 2 or 3 times a week and passes out, 100 tracts or whatever. And he's 89 years old this year. He'll be in December. He'll be that. And he's fallen twice. He fell the first time. He was in the hospital for 7 weeks. And then a couple months later, he fell again, and he was in the hospital for 5 weeks. And so, but he's back out, and they just moved on Saturday to a new house, and he wants to start a new ministry in that house. So pray for them also. But so I appreciate your prayers for our ministry in Japan. Is there any questions? Real quick in closing, any questions that you have about Japan? Yes, sir. My father's name is Pat Melton. My mom's name is Wanda, so Pat and Wanda Melton. Dad's been in Japan. Well, he's been a missionary in Japan since 1965. He was saved in Japan. I think I gave his testimony when I was here last, but maybe some people weren't here. But my dad was in the military. After high school, he joined the Air Force, and they sent him over to Japan. I think it was 1940-something, and he was there, and he was not saved, and a buddy in the barracks started a witness to him. And he got convicted, and he got saved. And he really got saved. He quit smoking, he quit drinking, he quit country music, which he thought was bad at the time. But he quit all those things because he said, this is not right. And then he went out with some missionaries, and he caught a burden for Japan. And he said, I'm going to come back to this mission in Japan. So he came back, moved back to the States, met my mom, married her in 6 months, and then went down to Bob Jones and graduated from there. Had a few kids and went over to Japan and has been there ever since. So he always said from day one, he said, I'm going to die in Japan. And so he's been over there for almost 60 years now, I guess, as a missionary. So, all right, any other questions? Yes, sir. Did you say a verse? Sure. I'll say John 3:16. Everybody wants that one. So do you want the old version or the new version? You couldn't care less. The new version says, 神は実にその一人子を与えになったほどに世を愛された。それを御子を信じる者が一人として滅ぶことなく永遠の命を持つためである。The old version says, それ神はその一人子を賜うほどに世を愛したまいり、すべて彼を信ずる者の滅びずして常しえの命を得んためなり。ヨハネ3章16節. So, you see the difference there? Yeah, they have the old version we used to use when I was a kid. It's sort of like, like a King James English. It's old, these and thous kind of thing. And nobody understands that now. But that's the version we used when I was a kid. So that's why I memorized John 3:16 in. So, anything else? Anybody else have any questions, any comments, any suggestions? Yes, sir.
What is the city in which you serve?
Okay, we're serving in Nagoya. In America's pronounced Nagoya, but it's in the, so Tokyo is here. Japan comes around like this. Tokyo's here, Nagoya's here, Osaka's here. The three largest cities in Japan are all on the east coast of Japan, because Japan kind of curved around. So we're about 5 hours driving southwest of Tokyo, and we're about 3 hours northeast of Osaka, which is the second largest area in Japan. Middle there. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. Have we had trouble with weather in our church in Japan? Yeah, we have typhoons every year. There's multiple typhoons in Japan. But where we're located, we usually don't get much. We've never, one time we were supposed to have a real bad typhoon. So my wife woke us up at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Everybody go down on the stairs and, the stairwell. There's no windows. Every other room in our house has windows. And like we stayed there for a little while. It's like, I'm going back to bed. It was some wind, but it's like, so they do have some bad typhoons, but where we are, it doesn't usually affect us too much. So, but yeah, every year that Japan has lots of typhoons. Okinawa usually comes up from the south, so Okinawa always gets it. They get it first, so they build houses down there to withstand those kind of things. Yes, sir. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, they're still the third largest GDP in the world, gross domestic product, GDP in the world. They're still the third. They're China, U.S. is number 1, and China's number 2, and Japan's number 3. Even though this teeny-weeny country, they haven't. The yen is right now is 141 yen or something like that. It was 110 yen. So by the dollar, it's not doing good as far as economically. And they are struggling. The prices are rising. The inflation most of the time in Japan, when they don't want to raise the prices, so they'll reduce the amount. So something that was a liter, you look at it and it says 900 milliliters, and I was like, oh, it's the same price, but they reduce the amount. So products are getting more expensive for Japanese. For us, they're getting cheaper because the yen keeps on dropping and the dollar value keeps on going up. And so before we could take $1 and buy 110 yen worth of products, now we take $1, we could buy 140 yen worth of products. So for us, it's a little bit cheaper, but for most Japanese, it's more expensive. But the government is in debt, like not as much as the U.S. government's in debt, but it is. But there's no crisis or anything like that. So it's not, but it's not. Yeah, it is not like it used to be. That's for sure. Yes, sir.
You ever said learn English? Learning English? You ever said?
Yes. Japanese start learning English in kindergarten, and so they learn it all through, elementary school, middle school, and then high school. They learn English. Can they speak it? No. It's like they can read it and they can write it, but they cannot speak it. Japanese is such a different language. The syntax in Japan, it always ends in a verb. So if I'm saying, I'm going to the store, I say, I to the store go. The go is always, the verb is always last. And so to them, changing that around in your head and stuff is very difficult. Our pronunciation is very difficult for them because, you think Japanese is difficult for Americans to pronounce. Well, English is difficult for Japanese to pronounce because Japanese only have 5 vowel sounds, and they're true vowel sounds. A, I, U, E, O. That's it. There's nothing else. You come to American and say a, u, and a, and all sorts of. When you combine the diphthongs, they change the a and o together sound differently than a and o. In Japan, an a and o together sounds like an a and an o together. So when they try to pronounce that, and then there's some pronunciation they don't have. They don't have a th sound in Japan. So if you talk to a Japanese, he'll say za, like the carpet, za carpet, it's like za, he can't say th, he can't say the, so he pronounces it like a z. And so to them it's a difficult language to learn, but they do learn English, and if they're studious and diligent, they can speak it to you. And a lot of Japanese will come up and try to speak English with you. But I taught English in a high school when we first went to Japan in 1999. We just went over there, and so some English teachers would come up and try to talk to English. English teachers. Okay, there were about 8 of us, and I was the only foreigner. They were all Japanese English teachers, and so they come up and start talking English, and I go, "Are you trying to ask for information, or you just want to talk English? If you're trying to ask for information, ask me in Japanese. I don't know what you're saying. These are English teachers, okay? If you just want to talk, I'll help you with your pronunciation, but So they learn it, but they can't speak it. There you go. So, there's a question back there. Yes, ma'am. No, there is more than there was, but they blame it on foreigners because there are many, many more foreigners there than there used to be. Japanese are usually so. Japanese control their citizens by shame, whatever. It's shameful to do this and it's shameful to do that. So. They keep them in check by social pressure. Like I said, in Japan, the worst thing that can happen to you is if your peers reject you. If they say, "Oh, you're bad," that's horrible. You don't want your friends to accept you, not reject you. And so, rejection by society keeps people in check. It's not that they have good hearts. Okay, they're sinners just like anybody else, and if they could get away with it, they do, and they do crime because they think they can get away with it sometimes, but not as much as in America, no, for sure. Any other lesson? No, we have no government opposition whatsoever. Government is friendly to churches. They give them permission to be there. I've never had my visa rejected or anything. So, and right behind your last question. Oh, okay. All right. Good. Yep. Well, we'll be here, like Pastor said, for the next couple of days, and we have a table back there. Please come back and pick up some prayer cards, and if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer the questions for you. Thank you.
All right, good. Thank you, brother. That was very good. Appreciate the Acts 17 connection there, too, to what you're doing in ministry. like he said, if you have questions, please ask. It'll help you to better know how to pray. And these are our missionaries, and so we want to care for them. By the way, speaking of our missionaries, the Christmas cards, I've been told that we have until tomorrow night. So if you say, oh, I worked so hard to get them ready today, but I just couldn't do it, and you feel really bad, don't worry. You have till tomorrow night, tomorrow evening service to do that. So this afternoon, if you weren't planning on it, but you thought, well, I probably should, but then you ran out of time, you can still do it. And so we want to be a blessing to our missionaries. And so you have till tomorrow evening. That's what Tina told me. So I have it from her. So we're going to be packing them on Tuesday. So appreciate that. All right, let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll dismiss and come back in about 15 minutes for our service. Thank you, Lord, for the good time we've had around your word in Acts 17, and just seeing how the word there connects to missions even today, and really that connects to our mission right here in our community, because there are people from different parts of the world here with different beliefs and different philosophies. And I pray that you'll help us to consider how we might be better used by you to interact and to minister to folks. I do pray for the Meltons, that you'll bless their ministry, that you will provide a national pastor that will be able to come in and take that church so that they can plant others and reach more people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We pray your continued blessing on our conference. Thank you just for the time we can hear about missions, and I pray that our hearts will connect well to this, which is your heartbeat. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, we're dismissed.